Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of Midnite Snacks. We have a review today of one of my favorite films. And last week in the postmortem of our first episode, we realized that we did not kind of give any context into who we are. I don't even think we said our names. So, Jerry, you very astutely noticed that. And I think we wanted to remedy that this week. So I'll let you go first.
Thanks. So my name is Jerry. I am a big movie buff. Obviously, I've been collecting movies since I was in third or fourth grade, VHS. So I've gone through a lot of technology. I think the best way to sum it up for me, right, is maybe just my top 4 favorite movies that come to mind. Okay. Just to give you an idea of kind of like what I'm into. I think Call Me by Your Name, for sure, one of my top favorite movies of the last like 10 years. Jurassic Park, to me, chef's kiss, perfection. Roger Rabbit, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? I think I'm still not recovered from that movie. And I am a big TCM classic movies guy, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that Casablanca is probably one of my favorite 40s film noir films. So you'll be hearing a lot of these styles of movies from me, a lot of input, just because that's kind of what I'm into. How about you?
That's your thing. That's your wheelhouse.
For sure.
And so I'll comment on that in a second because I have something interesting to say. But my name is Alex, and my favorite films tend to be like such a big range. Like I love Back to the Future. I'm a big fan of all 3. I love The Lost Boys. I love B horror. I love stuff like Jurassic Park. I also love, kind of like more art films like the movie Drive. So I think I'm going to bring the perspective of a lot of like more of like the B movie schlocky stuff because I'm a big fan of that. And you're going to be bringing a lot of like the classic stuff. Sure. And I think we thought that was going to be kind of like an interesting point of view for both of us. And I know at some point you're going to be presenting some films that are older that I've never seen. And we did that with today's film. I presented a movie that you had never seen that is one of my absolute favorites. And I think we're going to jump right into the review.
Yes, please.
Okay, awesome. So today's film is The Monster Squad. The Monster Squad is a 1987 American horror comedy film directed by Fred Dekker and written by Fred Dekker and Shane Black. Plot synopsis for The Monster Squad is a group of 12-year-olds, including Sean, Patrick, Horace, Rudy, Eugene, and Phoebe, form a Universal Monsters fan club called The Monster Squad. When Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Wolfman, the Mummy, and Gillman arrive in their small town, the kids must stop them from obtaining an amulet that will give Dracula the power to rule the world. This is The Monster Squad. Okay, Jerry, what are your thoughts?
Well, first I have to say I am kicking myself because I love these kind of movies, and I love all of the movies that the monsters come from. I have been watching them for years, and this is the first time I saw Monster Squad. Yep. So I'm kicking myself because I could have been enjoying it for the last 30 years. I loved it. I thought it was so freaking good. I thought it was so freaking funny.
I told you.
They had me at the Stephen King Rules t-shirt. Yep. I need to find a copy of that for myself and wear it. Maybe you'll see it on the podcast.
eBay has a ton of them for like $15.
Totally need to get that. Absolutely loved it. There's a lot in it that I could appreciate from the original films. So from an 80s kid gang perspective, love that. The homage to the original monster films, I loved that. And I also loved that it had a little bit of heart, right? It wasn't just kids fighting monsters. I think my favorite scene in the movie is when they go to the old German neighbor and the kid says, "Wow, you know a lot about monsters." And the guy, he, was like, I guess I do know a lot about monsters. And he closes the door and he's got the Holocaust tattoo on his arm. Blindsided by that, was not expecting it in this kind of film, but I thought it was so poignant. It was so well done. And it added such gravitas, I think, not only to the interaction with the kids, but also like this person who has seen real monsters in his life. So, I mean, 10 out of 10. I only hate that I waited this long to watch the movie.
Yeah, and you know, that's the interesting thing about this movie is that it has all these little things kind of peppered out within it that, you know, I think kind of elevate it to a place that you don't expect from a film like this.
Absolutely.
And the way we got you onto the Monster Squad is you were hanging out here at my house and recently, and I was going through my Blu-ray collection because we were talking about potential movies to do on this show. And I mentioned the Monster Squad, and you said that you've never seen it. And it is one of my favorite movies. And did you ever have a history with the Monster Squad before? Like, have you ever heard of it?
Excuse me. I have heard of it. I don't know what I thought about it. I think I didn't think much about it, to be honest.
Okay.
And again, this is shocking because I love Halloween. Like, Halloween is my favorite holiday. My roster of Halloween films is on a rotation September 1 through October 31st, right? And it just never made it into the rotation. I will say I don't lean into 80s movies all that much.
Okay.
And I think I just kind of lumped it into that genre. They have a very specific way of doing things and kind of like these buddy comedies and stuff like that. And so I just don't think I thought about it.
Sure.
I also thought that it was going to be slapstick comedy.
Right.
And like, I don't know if I needed that in a Halloween movie, but it is not that, right?
Right.
And you live and you learn. So I don't know I don't think I thought much about it until we had the conversation, and I watched it, and like I said, I thought it was super excellent. It's already in my cart. I will be purchasing a Blu-ray version of it very shortly, because it's making it into the Halloween rotation for sure.
And there is a fantastic Blu-ray release that came out about a year ago by Kino Lorber, which is a boutique physical media studio. They make incredible stuff, and that Blu-ray is full of extras, has a gorgeous transfer. Highly recommended if you're someone who at the end of this review enjoys the Monster Squad and would like to own it, even though it is available for streaming for free on Tubi. Go give Tubi a shot. Yeah, so the Monster Squad, I guess like going into my side of like my history with the Monster Squad is I was a kid. I maybe sometime in the early 90s, maybe mid 90s, I remember I wrote down in my notes that it was a bit of a fever dream. And the reason why it's a bit of a fever dream is I was changing channels really late at night. I think it was on a Friday night. It was close to midnight. And I was watching a cable channel that only played movies. I think it was like a Stars or Stars variant at the time. And I just remember this movie started and I was like, what is this? Like, it was immediate with, you know, the opening scene with you know, Van Helsing and everything going on there, and just like the whole vibe of everything. I was like immediately hooked. And then it jumps into the plane scene with you know, Dracula or the Frankenstein's monster, and then I was just completely blown away. And then the reason it turned into a bit of a fever dream is because I never saw it ever again for years. And it wasn't until the internet started becoming more commonplace that I started going out onto, you know, message boards and stuff, that I started to see people kind of bringing up the Monster Squad. And when I saw it, I was like, hey, that's that movie. That's that movie I saw. And, you know, the Monster Squad for a while had essentially become lost media. You could not obtain it. Video store copies did not exist anymore, even when Blockbuster was big for us.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It was not on DVD. There was huge rights issues back when we were like in high school that it was not on DVD. It had received a release overseas, but, you know, in general, you couldn't get it. It wasn't until kind of more of like the bootleg market started happening, where someone took the Laserdisc over in the UK and kind of made a digital copy. And then that was how that happened. So when we were in like high school, I had the Monster Squad really late in the game, maybe around 2006, because someone had like put it and I burned it on a DVD, and I felt like I had this like treasure because there was no hope for Monster Squad fans to ever see it on physical media.
Wow.
And then in the years since, it's become this like massive cult classic, which is really nice for me. It's really nice for me because I'm such a big fan of it. And you know, right from the get.
And what's surprising is that, you know, I did a little research on it. It was a flop. Like it made no money when it first came out in 1987. And what's interesting, and I'm not, now that you mentioned, you know, there was some rights issues, I'm not surprised by that because in my infinite research for this movie, it was pitched to Universal, who owns the intellectual property of Dracula and Frankenstein and all these classic monsters, but they didn't want it. They just didn't want it. So they ended up acquiring the rights for international distribution, but they didn't put out the movie. And what's interesting about that, which is also kind of related, is because they own the intellectual likeness of the characters, all the characters in the film are like a little bit different than the established, you know, what the monsters kind of look like. And that was because Universal didn't back them. So all of the monsters, although well done, I mean, the prosthetics and the werewolf and the creature from the Black Lagoon all look great. But if you are a fan of the original movies, which I am, and you watch this, there's something a little bit kind of off about all of them. And really that's why, because they just didn't have the rights to kind of, do direct copies of them.
Yeah, that was because I kind of did, you know, I think when I was younger, I was confused. I didn't know if it was an official Universal Monsters production. And upon reading a little bit more about it, I noticed that, you know, the way copyright and trademark works is if you tweak something a little bit, you can kind of get away with it. But, you know, getting away with the way the monsters are presented here, trying to claim that they're not, you know, like the Universal monsters is a bit of a stretch because it's not parody. They're not parodying them. They're largely played very straight. And the film is played, you know, very straight, even though it's camp. It's not, you know, like a Young Frankenstein or any of that kind of Mel Brooks, which under parody law, those are protected. You can use all that stuff.
Yeah.
I have here in my notes written, I said, this movie has it all for me. It has monsters, has creepy locations, mysterious German monster hunters, epic finale in a small town main street, tree houses, like animatronics, fantastic makeup. It has just vibes and mood. It is so 80s. You know, this movie gets compared a lot to the Goonies. People always just say it's the Goonies with monsters, and that's absolutely, I would say, what it feels like. And I think whenever people say that, it has less to do with whether it's story-wise like the Goonies, aside from that being a group of kids that kind of get together in a little adventure. And I think it has more to do with how it makes you feel, you know, and the way it looks. Like the movie has that kind of amazing adventure spirit that I think we all as kids wanted to have.
Yeah.
We all watched something like the Goonies and we're like, we want to get on that ship and we want to go into a cave. And this is very much that. You want to go on this adventure, stopping the monsters and Dracula and in a group setting, right? With your friends, right? Like you're all into the same thing. You're all into what's happening. You don't understand what's happening, but you know, that's par for the course, right? You're just trying to figure it out and stay alive. And then, you know, there's always that heroic kid who's like, we're going to do this. This is how we're going to do it. So, yeah, it was great. So interesting. The budget for this movie was $14 million. And it was a complete box office bomb. So it did not make that money back. And I was thinking when I was rewatching it ahead of this recording, I was like, man, for $14 million, it looks so good. Yep. Like it looks And it's kind of like what I was saying earlier. It looks better than you would expect something like this to look. And usually, whenever that happens to me, it signals that the people that were making it are incredibly talented at their craft. Because the fact that they can take this money that was given, and it's largely a low budget, and give something to you that was made on a low budget that feels fully realized, and like there was a lot of care put into it. It always just surprises me, but it makes me happy when something like that A happens, and B, over time people
Holds up.
learn. Right, it holds up and people learn to appreciate it. Like I can recommend the Monster Squad, and nowadays there are a lot of people that are like, oh, I don't want to watch anything that's old, or like the effects are cheesy. And I think if you approach something from a very cynical standpoint, that's a very kind of tired and basic criticism, like, oh, I can't watch this thing because it has old fashioned kind of like technology techniques and special effects. You have to be able to kind of contextually think of the time when it was made, and for the time it's doing really good stuff for what is essentially a children's movie with monsters. And considering that it's a children's movie, there are a lot of, I'm calling it a children's movie, but I think a lot of teens probably got a lot of enjoyment from this movie too at the time, or like over time, like at the video store, if they rented it with their friends. There's a lot of stuff that gets said by the characters and dialogue that is of its time. And at the time it was very common for movies like this to maybe use certain slurs, and at the same time kind of maybe reference sexual content more readily than a children's movie would do now. That was the standard for the 80s. And like, for example, the one scene, I won't go into more of like that dialogue, but there was one scene where I can't remember the character's name or not, but he specifically says, I have a glandular problem. And as a kid, since I barely had memory of this film, I used to say that. I used to be like, I have a glandular problem, but I couldn't as a joke, like whenever I was talking with friends, I'd be like, I'm sorry, I have a glandular problem, but I didn't remember where I got it from. And it was many years later that when I finally rewatched, I was like, that's where I got it from. Things that made me kind of laugh out loud. I mean, did you notice Jason Hervey from The Wonder Years?
The bully, who has to eat the Snickers bar. I love that.
And there's the candy bar off the ground. That was great. I laughed out loud recently just now when I was watching it, because when they're trying to induct Rudy into the Monster Squad and Rudy's not really taking it that serious, and he's like, Rudy, come on, man, this is a monster test, this is serious stuff, okay? Like, I just like let out this like laugh, because I'm like, that's such good dialogue. That's just such good dialogue for like showing how the world that these kids live in, you know what I mean? Like how serious they take their like little mundane kind of things that are so important to you when you're a kid, that as you get older, obviously life takes over and these kinds of more fanciful ways of thinking of stuff just kind of fall to the wayside. I mean, we could make the argument that us sitting here recording this podcast and kind of talking about movies is something other people would think is a little, maybe, well, why are you taking this so serious? But it makes us have a good time. It's something kind of silly and kind of fun for us to just kind of get out there. And I think that what was so nice to me about them had that quick line of dialogue.
Well, I will say that dialogue also contextualizes their age group, right? Mm-hmm. They are little kids. That's how little kids kind of talk to each other, right?
Right.
And to your point that it was very, there's some of the dialogue was kind of adult and stuff like that. But when you're a kid, you don't know what those things mean or what they say or what they, what they will cause. So I think that all kind of fits with this age group, right? Like they had a treehouse of monsters, like that everything around them was all very like little kiddish. But then they were faced with a really big danger, right? Dracula's coming. The werewolf is coming. The mummy's in the closet. Like some really major things were happening to them. So I think that adds to the drama.
And that mummy in the closet scene is fantastic. Yeah. It's so good. It's so good. This movie manages to be both creepy yet approachable for a kid at the same time. You know, if you're looking at that in one way, it's kind of creepy, but then as you get older, you just appreciate like the kind of camp kind of nonsense of a scene like that.
Yeah.
Something I wanted to point out too was the cinematography in this movie. I
Okay.
absolutely love it. And that kind of connects back to like what they were able to achieve on the budget, because you know, one thread that is going to constantly be on a lot of our episodes for me is cinematography. I'm a big stickler for the way movies look. I think a really good cinematographer that will light a scene the right way, that is trying to create some depth and it understands the world the movie is trying to build, they can elevate something like this, something that's low budget, into something that just looks and feels like it's destined to be taken serious because of the way it's shot. And
well, I also think to that point, not to cut you off, but I want to get this in there. I think what this movie does so well is borrow from the source material.
Right.
And a perfect example of that is when Frankenstein's monster approaches the little girl who's playing by the lake or playing by that body of water.
Oh, yeah.
That's in the original film. He kills that little girl in the first movie, right? It's literally shot. I don't know if it's shot by shot, but literally you see his footsteps and you see it from the perspective of the little girl. And I thought, oh, this is not going to end well, right? Because I know what I've seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And so for this movie to turn that on a dime and he be a friend to her, I think was so lovely and such a great pivot for this movie. But that's what this movie does so well. It kind of borrows what has already been done as the revealing of the monsters and incorporates it into this movie. And I can think of other examples, right? The creature from the Black Lagoon kind of popping up and stuff like that. But scene with Frankenstein was really beautiful.
Little types of references, you know what I mean? Like those kinds of references to what came before, that anyone who knows is going to be like, oh, that's like, you know, that's that scene from this original. And like you understand the reference, but then it can also be an educational moment too. You know, for someone like me, I had never seen any of the Universal monster movies, you know, when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So for me, that was largely an introduction to them. And then going back is when you start to notice all those references.
Absolutely.
Like now after watching so many Dracula films, the scene where there's the plane in the sky and it's holding all of the crates and it has the Frankenstein monster crate and it has like Dracula's coffin and, you know, the bat comes out of it. That is essentially the scene from Dracula that you always have, where the ship is taking his coffin across the ocean, and you know that ship is on the Demeter, and he ends up killing the whole crew, and you know that's Monster Squad's version of doing that. And as you get older and you go back, you start to notice those things. Maybe it makes you want to go read Dracula by Bram Stoker. Maybe it makes you want to watch the movies. So I wanted to call out something interesting. I love the cinematography, and it's by going back to that part. It's done by, I wanted to shout out to Bradford May. Bradford May was a cinematographer, and he ultimately did stuff like Darkman 2 and Darkman 3. And very interesting for us, he also did Madonna Innocence Lost. Which I'm not sure what Innocence Lost is. But I just saw that and I'm like, wait, there's a gay connection to the monster.
Is that a music video, I wonder?
Innocence Lost. It says here it's a TV movie. The early years of the entertainer's career are chronicled. It's about an hour and 30 minutes. Who knows? Maybe we'll review that at some point. And I wanted to call out to the score. I thought the score was fantastic. The score is thrilling, it's engaging, it knows when to be somber and when to kind of be creepy, and it also has it just sets the mood very much in line with the direction and the cinematography. And that was actually done by I had him here and I lost him. Bruce Boughton. Bruce Boughton did that one, and Bruce Boughton did Young Sherlock Holmes, which is one of my favorite movies. Have you ever seen that movie?
I haven't. No.
So I'm gonna have to add that one to the list at some point.
Okay.
We're gonna do that. He also did Harry and the Hendersons,
Oh, okay. A classic.
Miracle on 34th Street, and he also did Tiny Toon Adventures and the Homeward Bound films.
Wow, that's range.
Yeah. He did a bunch of good stuff. So when I saw that, I was like, you know what? That's why I like the way this sounds so much. Something I thought was interesting too was how this kind of maybe I would have to no, I guess the Munsters probably, because I noted that here. Frankenstein was obviously friendly, and that kind of became a very popular version of Frankenstein, I think, in film and TV. You got the friendly Frankenstein, Herman Munster and the Munsters.
Yeah.
And then in the movie Van Helsing from the early 2000s, Frankenstein, and that one is actually misunderstood as well. He doesn't want to hurt anyone. So immediately I was like, wait, we started getting a little bit more of a friendly Frankenstein post. I would say like post the original Universal Monsters, he started to be approached in some ways in a friendly way, and in some ways still kind of like that scary monster.
Well, that leads me to my first fun fact of this podcast.
Go for it.
So the writer of Monster Squad, apparently, according to the internet, was inspired by The Little Rascals and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Okay.
And if you know any of those, The Little Rascals as a cartoon or as a movie or as a series, or Abbott and Costello being a comedy duo, you realize that Monster Squad is the perfect melding of that, right? It's a gang of kids, and it's monsters, and it's the dynamic between them. So I thought that when I read that, I thought that makes total sense. I totally get it. And to your point, right, Frankenstein is not super scary in Abbott and Costello. So it's that demonstrifying Frankenstein a little bit. And then the other fun fact I had for this is less interesting, I think, but look what happened to his career. The actor who played Dracula, was chosen over Liam Neeson. So I mean, do with that information what you will. Liam Neeson has, he's everywhere now, and
that kind of makes me want to see Liam Neeson's audition. Like, did he bomb it?
There was no information. I don't know if it was like a scheduling thing. It was just, he was passed over for this guy, Duncan, whatever his name is. So I will say, just as a side note, I think Dracula was my least favorite monster of the monsters. I think he, being the main villain, I think fell a little flat for me. He also looked like he was, and he's the only one who looks human, right? Everybody else is kind of like a monster, but it just looked very Party City to me, his costume, which then the pendulum swings to everybody else, right? Like the werewolf was perfection.
Yeah, that
Frankenstein, when you see him with the bangs, like perfection. And then Black Lagoon Monster was just great. So I think, and the Mummy, oh my God, that little twink they got to be the Mummy, he was great too.
I mean, for all we know, that was a teenage Doug Jones, because Doug Jones just does, water creatures are his forte. Maybe that was him as a teenager, and that's what got him started on it.
Yep.
So did you get the name of that writer? Because I love that writer. So the writer of this film was Shane Black. It was Shane Black and Fred Decker. They co-wrote it. Shane Black very famously went on to do the Lethal Weapon movies.
Okay.
And he more recently, he wrote the Lethal Weapon movies, and he also then ventured off into directing in the early 2000s, and he did Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have, yeah.
And then he went on to do The Nice Guys with Ryan Gosling and Russell Crowe. fantastic movie, very much in
Did
line
you
with
not
the Kiss
recommend
Kiss
that to
Bang
me? I
Bang.
think you made me watch that.
I might have. It's a
not.
really good. It's a really good pairing with Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Yeah, I actually think it was my cousin Julian because I saw it with him, and he like sat me down. He was like, "You gotta watch this."
Okay.
And bro movies are not my thing, but it was really great. So,
And he also did a very divisive movie that I tend to be a fan of. And who knows, maybe we will do this one. It's a little bit more, it'll maybe at some point we'll go into the MCU. And this is maybe an MCU movie that I would be interested in talking about. It's Iron Man 3.
okay.
He wrote and directed Iron Man 3, which is considered very divisive. You have some people who think it's the best Iron Man. You have some people who think it's the most interesting because it does a lot with Tony's character. But then you have some people who think it's garbage. So that's the fun fact about Shane Black's involvement. I also wanted to mention, did you notice that Stan Winston created the monsters for this movie? And Stan Winston very famously did Jurassic Park dinosaurs.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He did the alien from, the xenomorphs from Alien.
Okay.
So Stan Winston is like a legend, and he's the one who did the monster costuming for this film.
Well, it speaks volumes to how I didn't know that, and I thought the work was remarkable because it really, I think what they did with the people who were in costumes, was fantastic.
Yeah, and as I was like looking into this, I couldn't remember if, I mentioned The Lost Boys earlier, and The Lost Boys is going to probably come up a lot, and we are going to be reviewing that soon. Yeah, and it is a first time watch for you as well.
It will be. So
that'll be interesting. I was trying to wonder if this movie came out before or after The Lost Boys, and it actually came out within a month of each other in 1987.
Interesting.
The Lost Boys was released July 1987, and Monster Squad was August 1987. And I think the reason why I was wondering that in the first place is because Rudy kind of reminded me of the main character, kind of like the tone of the Lost Boys, kind of like teenagers. Like he has that vibe, which that was probably the vibe for cool, edgy kids in the 80s and teen movies. But still, that's what made me kind of want to look into that. Okay. Interesting little maybe final tidbit on that I have for the Monster Squad is there is a documentary that came out in 2018 called Wolfman's Got Nards.
Okay.
Wolfman, which is, famous line in the movie when one of the characters kicks the Wolfman in the crotch and the Wolfman shrieks in pain. And that's when he says, "Holy shit, the Wolfman's got nards." That was made in 2018, kind of chronicling the journey this movie has had to cult status. For a while, like I mentioned in the late 2000s, it started having like one-time screenings that were getting sold out at Alamo Drafthouse. And then now it's, just turned into this whole other thing. It really has become a Halloween classic. Yeah. I love this movie. I'm glad you loved it. I'm glad that you finally got to see it and you have a new film for your roster. I'm glad I was able to introduce you to it.
Thank you. Yes. Like I said, I will be purchasing. I will say, back to an earlier point that you made about how movies reference each other. And I know you haven't seen it, and maybe we'll discuss it, maybe we won't. But I'm a big fan of Leica Studios and like their claymation films. Paranorman is, in my opinion, the best thing they've ever done. And it's a stacked team, right? They are all great. But if you take plot point by plot point, character by character of the Monster Squad and Paranorman, and I'm watching Monster Squad and I'm like, where have I seen this before? And it's basically Paranorman, whereas they're dealing with Dracula and werewolf and the Universal catalog. In Paranorman, it's just zombies. So that's really where the films switch. But you've got the cheerleader who has to read a story, or the girl in Monster Squad in Paranorman, he's got to read a story as well to kind of put this witch down. The incompetent police, the chaos in the town, the sister being involved with these little kids, and like she doesn't match anything that they're doing, but there she is. I just think is great, right? Like that they took this like little kernel of this film and they made something similar but different that still plays such an homage, I think, to the original Monster Squad story.
And the sister character, she brings a lot of Phoebe. She brings a lot of heart. Like, you know what I mean? Like, she's kind of like the innocence, and she's very much treated that way in the film, especially in the finale. She's very much the innocence in all this kind of darkness that's happening. And, these kids that are kind of maturing into adulthood, kind of being thrust into this situation. But at the same time, like, her innocence within the context of the film is ultimately what kind of saves them all. And the movie's just so good. I have a feeling maybe at some point we will reference this film a lot over the course of the podcast, and as we continue to review other stuff, we're going to start to see the Monster Squad's influence on stuff that's come out today. Very famously, people love to pinpoint that Monster Squad very much maybe was watched by the Duffer Brothers, who ended up doing Stranger Things, because there's a lot, just as much as there's a lot of Spielberg in Stranger Things,
and Super 8 as well.
Super 8. You look at, and Super 8, right? Super 8 feels all these types of movies like those are my favorite types of these, like kids solving these end of the world kind of supernatural events. Monster Squad does it so well. Highly recommend everyone out there give it a shot, add it to your roster for Halloween season. And I think now we're getting to the part of the episode where we say what we're currently watching. You
go first, because I need to build up to mine.
Sure, no problem. What did I watch this week? I feel like I watched so much stuff in preparation for the podcast. I think I mentioned before last week that I've been watching 911. This was part 2 of Be NATO. Angela Bassett in the middle of an airplane that has crashed into another airplane, and she needs to bring it to landing and save it while there's multiple medical emergencies on the plane, and they need to communicate with people on the ground to walk them through helping the people with the medical emergencies. It's completely bonkers. But I absolutely love it. I don't think I watched anything else this week. I don't know if I had the time for it. I think that was really just it. There's been so much going on. But yeah, your turn.
Well, Heartstopper season 3.
That's right.
Big week for the Heartstopper fandom. I watched it all in one day. I watched it all in one sitting. That show, for anybody who hasn't seen it, please go and watch it. It is good for your soul. I won't get into what happened. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. It is so emotional. It is so charged, but at the same time, it is such a beautiful story. And what I think Alice Oseman, the writer and creator of Heartstopper, the comic, and the screenwriter for the show, does so beautifully is contextualize these queer kids under normal circumstances, right? Like, it's not a big deal that they are transgender. It's not a big deal that they are gay. They're just going through their teenage life the way that anybody or any other teenager would go through, right? But then some really serious stuff happens, and it's them dealing with that. And man, season 3, episode 1 through 5, like, they do not stop choking you until probably the end of that 5th episode this season. So, very emotional, well acted. Joe Locke, who plays Charlie Spring, he's also in Agatha All Along. If that kid doesn't get an Emmy nomination for this season, there's just no justice in the world. He played that role, a role that I think would be very, very easy to fall into melodrama.
Mhm.
in a way that is not that. He plays it honestly. He plays it in a way that you feel for him. You want to defend him. When he's happy, you're happy. When he's sad, you're sad. He is what that show revolves around, especially in this third season. And he just did a masterful job. I mean, they all did. But this, I think, and I love every season of this show. I think this is a standout for them for sure. So highly recommend. If you are feeling emotionally vulnerable, maybe don't recommend right away. Maybe wait for a sunny day to watch. But
You didn't have to call me out like that. You didn't have to call me out.
It was it's a remarkable piece of television, and like just proving that good TV is still out there.
I mean, that's a glowing review, and I love how passionate you are about this show. Because
I'm getting a tattoo. Like I've already decided. That show ended season 3, and I'm like, I need to get something. I need to get something on my body that will forever remind me of how I feel right now.
And I mean, are you even a geeky kind of stan millennial for something if you don't go get tattoos about your favorite, film media or like, fiction, like books? Like if you're not getting quotes, if you're not getting kind of like iconic imagery from like your favorite novel, your favorite film,
well,
like,
you can see.
No, I know. Yeah. And I mean, I have like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Power Rangers, Batman. Like I got the whole, here's more. I have the whole gamut of it.
Yeah. Oh, well, actually topical of this episode, I just found a beautiful image of the Bride of Frankenstein in this kind of line art style. So she will also be my next addition. So to answer your question, absolutely yes. If I love something, it's staying on me forever.
Same. And I mean, I don't think I regret any of them. I don't think I regret any of my tattoos. Sure. And in fact, I'm like overdue for more geek tattoos. Yeah. So at some point those will come. And at some point I do want to watch Heartstoppers. I think your enthusiasm for it and just knowing that it's well made probably gives me more incentive to want to see it. Yeah. And at the same time, I struggle with stuff that gets too emotional and too deep. Like I some people like kind of interacting with that. I have my moments when I want to interact with kind of very deep kind of emotional sadness. Yeah. So I think
I will say that every season is different. Okay. I think the first season is very, very it's pure escapism, right? Like they are just these happy teenagers who are going through teenagery stuff. The music, I mean, you want to talk about beautiful music, like they create Spotify playlists for their show every season because the music is just so perfect. Smart. The music is perfect. The animation in it that captures how they're feeling is beautiful. So I would say the first season is kind of light. I would say the second season toward the end gets a little bit more emotional, and then this third season you're just skidding the entire time because it is so emotional, and some really important things happen, right? Like there's a trans character in the show, and in this last season there's a really important problematic moment where she faces transphobia, right? And like that has not really come up so pointedly before. So I think things have all been coming to a head. So it's not all doom and gloom. It's far from it. But I would say definitely worth watch. And I read the comic books too. Like I'm all over it.
I
have a pin somewhere.
You're fully in on the Heartstopper. Yeah. Well, there you guys have it. You got you got some recommendations for us. Main feature this week, it was the Monster Squad. We both loved it. Highly recommend you guys go check that out. It's available for streaming for free on Tubi. Jerry has given us
Pluto TV as well.
Oh, Pluto has it too. I didn't know. Yeah. I mean, Jerry has given us an amazing glowing review for Heartstoppers, and I gave you a glowing review for 911's Be NATO episode 2.
Watch
Be NATO
it.
episode 2. I told you I'm going to bring the schlock, and that is definitely the schlock. Although with a lot of hot guys on there too. So hot guys, Angela Bassett, disasters that are completely ridiculous. Definitely go check that out. So that'll be it for episode 2 of Midnight Snacks. We will see you next week.
Thank you for joining us, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.